Welcome back to Paper Cuts, everyone. This is a very special occasion. We're reading the first fan-requested book. I have a fan Discord, which is linked in the description if you're watching this as a recording, and someone suggested this in the new Paper Cuts channel, where I have an entire channel of the Discord dedicated to letting people decide what books they want to see, or at least suggesting books for me to read. So, now, let's get into the first fan-requested book. It's Paradise Lost. Who's it by? Remind me. If my book reader would remind me who this is by. John Milton. Paradise Lost by John Milton is what we're reading. Book 1? It says book 1 instead of chapter 1. That's odd. We'll see. Cross that bridge when we get there. Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with the loss of Eden, to one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, on that secret top of Oreb or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd, who first taught the chosen seed. In the beginning, how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos, or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God. I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian? Aeonian. Above the Aeonian mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou know'st, thou from the first was present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like sast, brooding on the vast abyss, and madst it pregnant. What in me is dark illumine, what is low raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert the eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell, say first what cause moved our great parents in that happy state, flavored of heaven so highly, to fall off from their Creator and transgress his will, for one restraint, lords of the world besides. Who first seduced them to that foul revolt? The infernal serpent he it was, whose guile, stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind. What time his pride had cast him out from heaven, with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid inspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he trusted to have equalled the Most High, if he opposed, and with ambitious aim, against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven, and battle proud with vain attempt. Him the almighty power hurled headlong flaming from the ethereal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire, who durst defy the omnipotent to arms. 9 times the space that measures day and night to mortal men, he with his horrid crew lay vanquished, rowling in the fiery gulf. Confounded though immortal, but his doom reserved him to more wrath, for now the thought both of lost happiness and of lasting pain torments him. Round he throws his baleful eyes, that witnessed huge affliction and dismay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. At once, as far as angels can, he views the dismal situation waste and wild, a dungeon horrible on all sides round, as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness, visible, served only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes, that comes to all, but torture without end still urges in a fiery deluge, fed with ever-burning sulphur unconsumed. Such place eternal justice had prepared for those rebellious here in their prison ordained, in utter darkness, and their portion set as far removed from God and light of heaven, as from the centre thrice to the utmost pole. Oh, how unlike the place from whence they fell, There the companions of his fall, overwhelmed with floods and whirlwinds of tempestuous fire, he soon discerns, and weltering by his side, one next himself in power, and next in crime, long after known in Palestine, and named Beelzebub. To whom the arch-enemy, and hence in heaven called Satan, with bold words breaking the horrid silence, thus began: If thou be'st he, but oh, how fallen, how changed from him, who in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, didst outshine myriads throw bright. If he whom mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope, and hazard in the glorious enterprise, joined with me once, now misery hath joined in equal ruin, into what pit thou seest, from what heights fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder. And till then, who knew the force of those dire arms? Yet not for those, nor what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent or change. Though changed in outward lustre, that fixed mind and high disdain from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and to the fierce contention brought along innumerable force of spirits armed, that durst dislike his reign, and me preferring his utmost power with adverse power opposed, in dubious battle on the plains of heaven, and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost, the unconquerable will, and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield, and what else is not to be overcome. That glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me, to bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and defy his power, who from the terror of this arm so late doubted his empire, that were low indeed, that were an ignominy, ooh, that's a very good word, that were an ignominy, and shame beneath this downfall, since by fate the strength of gods and this imperial substance cannot fail, since through experience of this great event, in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war irreconcilable, to our grand foe who now triumphs, and in the excess of joy, sole reigning holds the tyranny of heaven. So spake the apostate angel, though in pain, vaunting aloud, but racked with deep despair. And him thus answered soon his bold compare: O Prince, O Chief of many-throned powers, that led the embattled seraphim to war under thy conduct, and in dreadful deeds, fearless, endangered heaven's perpetual King, and put to proof his high supremacy, whether upheld by strength or chance or fate. Too well I see and rue the dire event, that with sad overthrow and foul defeat hath lost us heaven, and all this mighty host, in horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish. For the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigor soon returns, though all our glory extinct and happy state here swallowed up in endless misery. But what if he, our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have overpowered such force as ours, have left us this our spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls, by the right of war, whate'er his business be, here in the heart of hell, to work in fire, or to do his errands in the gloomy deep. What can it then avail, though yet we feel strength undiminished or eternal being, to undergo eternal punishment? Whereto with speedy words the archfiend replied: Fallen cherub, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering, but of this be sure, to do aught good never be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evils seek to bring forth good, our labor must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps shall grieve him, if I fail not, and disturb his inmost counsels from their destined aim. But see the angry victor hath recalled his ministers of vengeance and pursuit, back to the gates of heaven. The sulphurous hail shot after us in storm, o'erblown hath laid the fiery surge that from the precipice of heaven received us falling, and the thunder, winged with red lightning and impetuous rage, perhaps have spent his shafts and ceases now to bellow through the vast and boundless deep. Let us not slip the occasion, whether scorn or satiate fury yielded from our foe. Seest thou yon dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the seat of desolation, void of light, save what glimmering of these livid flames casts pale and dreadful? Thither let us tend, from off the tossing of these fiery waves, there rest, if any rest can harbour there, and reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, our own loss how repair, how overcome this dire calamity, what reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not resolution from despair. Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate, with head uplift above the wave, and eyes that sparkling blazed, his other parts besides, prone on the flood, extended long and large, lay floating many a rod, in bulk as huge as whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian, or earth-born, that warred on Jove, Briareus, or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held, or that the sea-beast Leviathan, which God of all his works created hugest, that swim the ocean stream. Him haply slumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night-foundered skiff, deeming some island, oft, as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly Rhine, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea, and wished morn delays. So stretched out huge in length the arch-fiend lay, chained on the burning lake, nor ever thence had risen or heaved his head, but that the will and high permission of all-ruling heaven left him at large to his own dark designs, that with reiterated crimes he might heap on himself damnation, while he sought evil to others, and enraged might see how all his malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace, and mercy shrewn on man by him seducted, but on himself terrible confusion, wrath, and vengeance poured. Forthwith upright he rears off from the pool his mighty stature. On each hand the flames, driven backward, slope their pointing spires, and rolled in billows, leave in their mist a horrid veil. Then with expanded wings he stares his flight, aloft, incumbent on the dusky air, that felt unusual weight, till on dry land he lights, if there were land that ever burned with solid as the lake with liquid fire, and such appeared in hue as when the force of the subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorius, or the shattered side of thundering Aetna, whose combustible and fueled entrails, thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aid the wind, and leave a singed bottom all involved with stench and smoke. Such resting found the soul of unblessed feet. Him followed his best mate, both glorying to have escaped the Stygian flood as gods, and by their own recovered strength, not by the sufferance of supernal power. Is this the region, this the soil, this the clime? Said then the lost archangel, this the seat that we must change for heaven, this mournful gloom for the celestial light? Be it so, since he who is now sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best, whom reason hath equalled, force hath made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he, whom thunder hath made greater? Here at last we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is both ambition, though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But wherefore let we, then, our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and call them not to share with us in their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more with rallied arms to try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell. So Satan spake, and him Beelzebub thus answered, leader of those armies bright, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled. If once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers, heard so oft in worst extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, in all assaults, their surest signal they will soon resume, new courage and revive, though now they lie grovelling and prostrate on yon lake of fire, as we, erewhile, astounded and amazed, no wonder fall in such a pernicious height. He scarce had ceased when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his ponderous shield, ethereal temper, massy, large, and round, behind him cast. The broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb through the optic glass the Tuscan artist views, at evening from the top of Fasole, or in Valdarno, to descry new lands, rivers, or mountains in her spotty globe. His spear, to equal which the tallest pine hewn on Norwegian hills be the mast of some great amiral, were but a wand. He walked with to support uneasy steps over the burning marl, not like those steps on heaven's azure, and the torrid clime smote on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. None the less he so endured, till on the beach of that inflamed sea he stood and called his legions, angel forms who lay entranced, thick as autumnal leaves that strow the brooks in Vallombrosa, where the Etrurian? Hang on, this is a place name. Let's see what it comes up with. Etruria, an ancient region in western Italy. Okay. Where the Etrurian shades, high overarched in bower, or scattered sedge afloat, when the fierce winds Orion armed hath vexed the Red Sea coast, whose waves overthrew Busiris and his Memphian chivalry, while with perfidious hatred they pursued the sojourners of Goshen, who beheld from the safe shore their floating carcasses and broken chariot wheels. So thick bestrown, abject, and lost lay these, covering the flood, under amazement of their hideous change. He called so loud that all the hollow deep of hell resounded. Princes, potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, once yours, now lost. If such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits, or have ye chosen this place, after the toil of battle, to repose your wearied virtue, for the ease you find to slumber here as in the vales of heaven? Or in this abject posture have ye sworn to adore the conqueror, who now beholds cherub and seraph rolling in the flood with scattered arms and ensigns, till anon his swift pursuers from heaven's gates discern the advantage, and descending tread us down, thus drooping, or with linked thunderbolts transfix us to the bottom of this gulf. Awake, arise, or be forever fallen. They heard and were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing, as when men want to watch on duty, sleeping found by whom they dread, rouse and bestir themselves ere well awake. Nor did they not perceive the evil plight in which they were, or the fierce pains not feel, yet to their general's voice they soon obeyed innumerable. As when the potent rod of Abram's son in Egypt's evil day waved round the coast upcalled a pitchy cloud of locusts, warping on the eastern wind, that o'er the realm of impious Pharaoh hung like the night, and darkened all the land of Nile, so numberless were these bad angels seen, hovering on the wing, under the cope of hell, twixt upper, nether, and surrounding fires, till as a signal given, the uplifted spear of their great Sultan waving to direct their course, in even balance down they light on the firm brimstone, and fill all the plain, a multitude like which the populous north poured never from her frozen loins to pass the reign of the Dinar, when her barbarous sons came like a deluge on the south, and spread beneath Gibraltar to the Libyan sands. Forthwith from every squadron in each band the heads and leaders thither hast where stood their great commander, godlike shapes and forms, excelling human, princely dignities and powers that erst in heaven sat on thrones, though of their names in heavenly records now there be no memorial, blotted out and erased by their rebellion from the books of life. Nor had they yet among the sons of Eve got them new names, till wandering o'er the earth, through God's high sufferance for the trial of man, by falsities and lies the greatest part of mankind they corrupted, to forsake God their Creator, and the invisible glory of him that made them, to transform off to the image of a brute, adorned with religions full of pomp and gold, and devils to adore for deities. Then they were known to men by various names and various idols through the heathen world. Say Muse their names then known, who first, who last, roused from the slumber on that fiery couch, at their great emperor's call, as next in worth, came singly where he stood on the bare strand, while the promiscuous crowd stood yet aloof. The chief widows, who from the pit of hell, roaming to seek their prey on earth, durst fix their seats long after the next seat of God, their altars by his altar, gods adored among the nations round, and durst abide. Jehovah thundering out of Zion, throned between the cherubim, yea, often placed within his sanctuary itself their shrines, abominations, with cursed things his holy rites and solemn feast profaned, and with their darkness durst affront his light. First, Moloch, horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children's cries unheard, that passed through fire to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worshipped in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Argob and in Bashan, to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, the wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God on that opprobrious hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom, Tophet thence, and black Genna called, the type of hell. Next came Chemos, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, from Arar to Nebo, and the wild of southmost Arabim, in Hesebon and Heranaim, Seon's realm, beyond the flowery dale of Sibma, clad with vines, and eel to the asphaltic pool. Peor was his other name, when he enticed Israel and Siddim, on their march from Nile, to do him wanton rites which cost them woe. Yet thence his lustful orgies he enlarged even to that hill of scandal by the grove of Moloch homicide, lust hard by hate, till good Josiah drove them hence to hell. With these came they who from the bordering flood of old Euphrates to the brook that parts of Egypt from Syrian ground had general names of Baalim and Ashtaroth, those male, these feminine. For spirits when they please can either side assume, or both, so soft and uncompounded is their essence pure, not tied or manacled with joint or limb, nor founded on the brittle strength of bones, like cumbrous flesh, but in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed, bright or obscure, can execute their airy purposes, and works of love or enmity fulfill. For those the race of Israel oft forsook their living strength, and unfrequented left his righteous altar, bowing lowly down to bestial gods, for which their heads as low bowed down in battle, sunk before the spear of despicable foes. With these in troop came Ashtoreth, whom the Phoenicians called Astarte, queen of heaven with crescent horns, to whose bright image nightly by the moon Sidonian virgins paid their vows and songs, in Sion also not unsung, where stood her temple on the offensive mountain, built by that uxorious king, whose heart, though large, beguiled by fair idolatresses, fell to idols foul. Thammuz came next behind, whose annual wound in Lebanon allured the Syrian damsels to lament his fate, in amorous ditties all summer's day, while smooth Adonis from his native rock ran purple to the sea, supposed with blood, of Thammuz yearly wounded. The love tale infected Zion's daughters with like heat, whose wanton passions in the sacred porch Ezekiel saw, when by the vision led his eye surveyed the dark idolatries of alienated Judah. Next came one who mourned in earnest, when the captive ark maimed his brute image, head and hands lopped off in his own temple, on the Grunsel edge where he fell flat and shamed his worshippers. Dagon was his name, a sea monster, an upward man and downward fish, and yet had his temple high reared in Azotus, dreaded through the coast of Palestine, in Gath and Ascalon, and Acheron and Gaza's frontier bounds. Him followed Rimmon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus, on the fertile banks of Abana and Parphar, lucid streams. He also against the house of God was bold. A leper once he lost and gained a king, Ahaz, his Scottish conqueror, whom he drew God's altar to disparage and displace for one of Syrian mode, whereon to burn his odious offerings and adore the gods whom he had vanquished. After these appeared a crew who under names of old renown, Osiris, Isis, Horus in their train, with monstrous shapes and sorceries abused, fanatic Egypt and her priests, to seek their wandering gods disguised in brutish forms other than human. Nor did Israel escape the infection, when their borrowed gold composed the calf in Oreb, and the rebel king doubled that sin in Bethel and Dan, likening his maker to the grazed ox Jehovah, who in one night when he passed from Egypt marking, equalled with one stroke both her firstborn and all her bleeding gods. Belial came last, then whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love vice for itself. To him no temple stood, or altar smoked. Yet who more oft than he, in temples and at altars, when the priest turns atheists as did Eli's sons, who filled with lust and violence the house of God. In courts and palaces he also reigns, and in luxurious cities, where the noise of riot ascends above their loftiest towers, and injury and outrage, and when night darkens the streets, then wander forth the sons of Belial flown with insolence and wine. Witness the streets of Sodom, and that night in Gibeah, when hospitable Doris yielded their matrons to prevent worse action. These were the prime in order and in might. The rest were long to tell, though far renowned. The Ionian gods of Javan's issue held gods, yet confessed later than heaven and earth their boasted parents. Titanian heaven's firstborn with his enormous brood, and birthright seized by younger Saturn. He from mightier Jove his own, and Rhea's son, like measure found. So Jove usurping reigned, these first in Crete, and Ida known. Thence on the snowy top of cold Olympus ruled the middle air, their highest heaven, or on the Delphian cliff, or in Dodona, and through all the bounds of Doric land, or who with Saturn old fled over Adria to the Hesperian fields, and o'er the Celtic roamed the most utmost isles. All these and more came flocking, but with looks downcast and damp, yet such wherein appeared obscure some glimpse of joy, to have found their chief not in despair, to have found themselves not lost in loss itself, which on his countenance cast like doubtful hue, but he his wonted pride, soon recollecting with high words that bare semblance of worth, not substance, gently raised their fainted courage, and dispelled their fears. Then straight commands that at the warlike sounds of trumpets and clarions he upreared his mighty standard, that proud honor claimed Azazel as his right, a cherub tall, who forthwith from the glittering staff unfurled the imperial ensign, which full high advanced, shone like a meteor streaming to the wind, with gems and golden lustre rich emblazed, seraphic arms and trophies, all the while sonorous metal blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host upsent a shout that tore hell's concave, and beyond frighted the reign of chaos and old night. All in a moment, through the gloom were seen 10,000 banners rise into the air, with orient colours waving. With them rose a forest huge of spears, and thronging helms appeared, and serried shields in thick array of depth immeasurable. Anon they moved in perfect phalanx, to the Dorian mood of flutes and soft recorders, such as raised to the height of noblest temper, heroes old arming to battle, and instead of rage deliberate valour breathed, firm and unmoved, with dread of death to flight or foul retreat, not wanting power to mitigate and assuage with these solemn torches troubled thoughts and chase anguish, doubt and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. Thus they, breathing united force with fixed thought, moved on in silence to soft pipes that charmed their painful steps o'er the burnt soil, and now advanced in view they stand, a horrid front of dreadful length and dazzling arms, in guise of warriors old, with ordered spear and shield, awaiting what command their mighty chief had to impose. He through the armed files darts his experienced eye, and soon traversed the whole battalion views, their order due, their visages and statures, as of gods, their number last he summons. And now his heart distends with pride, and hardening in his strength glories, for never since created man met such embodied force, as named with these could merit more than that small infantry, warred on by cranes. Through all, the giant blood of Phlegra with the heroic race were joined, that fought at Thebes and Ilium, on each side mixed with auxiliar gods. And what resounds in fable or romance of Arthur's son, begirt with British and Armoric knights, and all who since baptized or infidel jousted in Asmarant, or Montalban, or Damasco, Morocco, Tracebond, or whom Bisierta sent from Africa's shores, when Charlemagne with all his peerage fell by Fontarabia. Thus far these beyond compare of mortal prowess, yet observe their dread commander. He above the rest in shape and gesture, proudly eminent stood like a tower. His form had yet not lost all its original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured, as when the sun, new risen, looks through the horizontal misty air shorn of his beams, or from when behind the moon in dim eclipse disastrous twilight sheds on half the nations, and with fear of change perplexes monarchs. Darkened so, yet shone above them all the archangel. But his face deep scars of thunder had entrenched, and care sat on his faded cheek, but under brows of dauntless courage and considerate pride waited revenge. Cruel his eye, but cast signs of remorse and passion, to behold the fellows of his crime, the followers rather, far other once beheld in bliss, condemned for ever now to have their lot in plain. Millions of spirits for his fault, a marked of heaven. A marked? I think that means a marked of heaven, and from eternal splendors flung from his revolt. Yet faithful how they stood, their glory withered, as when heaven's fire scathed the forest oaks, or the mountain pines with singed top their stately growth, though bare stands on the blasted heath. He now prepared to speak, whereat their doubled ranks they bend from wing to wing, and half enclose him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he essayed, and thrice, in spite of scorn, tears such as angels weep burst forth. And at last words interwoven with sighs found out their way. O myriads of immortal spirits, O powers matchless but with the Almighty, and that strife was not inglorious, though the event was dire, as this place testifies, and this dire change hateful to mutter. But what power of mind, foreseeing or presaging, from the depth of knowledge past or present, could have feared how such united force of gods, how stood as stood like these, could ever know repulse? For who can yet believe, though after loss, that all these puissant legions, whose exile hath emptied heaven, shall fail to reascend, self-raised, and repossess their native seat? For me, be witness all of the host of heaven, if counsels different or dangers shunned, by me have lost our hopes. But he who reigns monarch in heaven, till then is one secure, sat on his throne, upheld by old repute, sat consent or custom, and his regal state, put forth at full, but still his strength concealed, which tempted our attempt, and wrought our fall. Henceforth his might we know, and know our own, so as to not either to provoke or dread new war provoked. Our better part remains to work in close design, by fraud or guile, what force effected not. that he no less at length from us may find, who overcomes by force, hath overcome but half his foe. Space may produce new worlds, whereof so rife there went a fame in heaven, that he ere long intended to create, and therein plant a generation, whom his choice regard should favour, equal to the sons of heaven. Thither, but if to pry, shall be perhaps our first eruption, thither or elsewhere. For this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage, nor the abyss long under darkness cover. But these thoughts full counsel must mature. Peace is despaired, for who can think submission? War, then, war, open or understood, must be resolved. He spoke, and to confirm his words out flew millions of flaming swords, drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. The sudden blaze far round illumined hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fierce with grasped arms clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance toward the vault of heaven. There stood a hill not far, grisly? Yes, that's an odd spelling. There stood a hill not far, whose grisly top belched fire and roaring smoke. The rest entire shone with a glossy scurf, undoubted sign that in his womb was hid metallic ore, the work of sulphur. Thither, winged with speed and numerous brigade, hastened, as when bands of pioneers with spade and pickaxe armed, forerun the royal camp to trench a field or cast a rampart. Mammon led them on. Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven, for even in heaven his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement trodden gold, than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in vision beatific. Beatific? Beatific. By him first men also, and by his suggestion taught, ransacked the centre, and with impious hands rifled the bowels of their mother earth for treasures better hid. Soon had his crew opened into the hill a spacious wound, and dug out ribs of gold. Let not admire that riches grow in hell, that soil may best deserve the prettiest bane. And here let those who boast in mortal things, and wondering tell of Babel and the works of Memphian kings, learn how their greatest monuments of fame and strength and art easily outdone by spirits reprobate, and in an hour what in an age they with incessant toil and hands innumerable scarce perform, nigh on the plain in many cells prepared, that underneath had veins of liquid fire, sluiced from the lake, a second multitude, with wondrous art founded the massive ore, severing each kind, and scrummed the bullion dross. A third, as soon as formed, within the ground of various mould, and from the boiling cells, by strange conveyance filled each hollow nook, as in an organ, from one blast of wind to many a row of pipes, the sound-board breathes. Anon, out of the earth, a fabric huge rose, like an exhalation, with a sound of dulcet symphonies, and voices sweet, built like a temple, where pilasters round were set, and Doric pillars overlaid with golden architrave. Nor there did want cornice or frieze, with bossy sculptures graven. The roof was fretted gold, not Babylon, nor great nor great Aclaro such magnificence equalled in all their glories to enshrine Belus or Serapis their gods, or seat their kings when Egypt with Assyria strove in wealth and luxury. The ascending pile stood fixed her stately height, and straight at the doors, opening their brazen folds, discover wide, within her ample spaces, o'er the smooth and level pavement, from the arched roof, pendant by subtle magic, many a row of starry lamps and blazing cressets fed, with naphtha and asphaltus yielded light as from a sky. The hasty multitude admiring entered, and the work some praise, and some the architect. His hand was known in heaven by many a towered structure high, where sceptred angels held their residence, and sat as princes, whom the supreme king exalted to such power, and gave to rule, each in his hierarchy, the orders bright. Nor was his name unheard or unadored in ancient Greece, and in Ausonian land men called him Mulciber. And how he fell from heaven they fabled, thrown by angry Jove, sheer o'er the crystal battlements. From morn to noon he fell, and from noon to dewy eve, a summer's day, and with the setting sun dropped from the zenith like a falling star on Lemnos, the Aegean ill? On Lemnos, the Aegean ill. Thus they relate, erring, for he with his rebellious rout fell long before, nor aught availed him now to have built in heaven high towers, nor did he escape by all his engines, but he was headlong sent with his industrious crew to build in hell. Meanwhile the ringed heralds, by command of sovereign power, with awful ceremony and trumpets sounding, throughout the host proclaim a solemn council forthwith to be held at Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. Their summons called from every and band-squared regiment, by place or choice the worthiest. They anon with hundreds and with thousands trooping came attended. All access was thronged, the gates and porches wide, but chief the spacious hall, through like a covered field, where the champions bold wont ride unarmed, and the soldier's chair defied the best of Panem chivalry. To the mortal combat or career with lance thick swarmed, both on the ground and in the air, brushed with a hiss of rustling wings, as bees, in springtime, when the sun with Taurus rides, pour forth their populous youth about the hive in clusters, they among fresh dews and flowers, by place or choice the worthiest. They fly to and fro, on the smoothed plank, the suburb of their straw-built citadel, new rubbed with balm, expatiate and confer their state affairs. So thick the airy crowd swarmed and were straitened, until the signal given, and behold, a wonder. But they, who now seemed in bigness to surpass earth's giant sons, now were less than smallest dwarves in the narrow room, throng numberless like the Pygmean race, beyond the Indian mounter, fairy elves whose midnight revels by a forest side or fountain, foam-belated peasant sees, or dreams he sees, while overhead the moon sits arbitress, and nearer to the earth wheels her pale course. They on their mirth and dance intent, with jocund music charm his ear. At once with joy and fear his heart rebounds. Thus incorporeal spirits to the smallest forms reduced their shapes immense, and were at large, though without number still amidst the hall of that infernal court. But far within, and in their own dimensions like themselves, the great seraphic lords and cherubim, in close recess and conclave sat, 1,000 demigods on golden seats frequent and full. After short silence then, and the summons read, the great consult began. And that's the end of the first book. Although, what we would consider it to be a chapter. I have to admit, this is really growing in me, especially as the Old English starts to fall. The oldish, I would say this is late Middle English, probably. As the antiquated style of English clicks into my brain, this is getting better. So, let's continue into chapter 2, shall we? High on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormus, and Ind, or where the gorgeous East with richest hand showers on her kings barbaric pearl and gold, Satan exalted sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence, and from despair thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, insatiate to pursue vain war with heaven, and by success untaught his proud imaginations thus displayed, powers and dominions, deities of heaven, for since no deep within her gulf can hold immortal vigour, though oppressed and fallen, I give not heaven for lost. From this descent celestial virtues rising will appear more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate. Me though just right, and the fixed laws of heaven did first create your leader, next free choice, with what besides in counsel or in fight hath been achieved of merit, Yet this loss, thus far at least recovered, hath much more establishment. In a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior. But who here will envy whom the highest place exposes foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim, your bulwark, and condemns to greatest share of endless pain? Where there is then no good for which to strive, no strife which can grow up there from faction, for none sure will claim in hell precedence, none whose portion is so small of present pain that with ambitious mind will covet more. With this advantage, then, to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old. Surer to prosper than prosperity could have assured us. And by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate. Who can advise may speak. And at this he ceased, and next him Moloch, sceptred king, stood up, the strongest and fiercest spirit that fought in heaven, now fiercer by his despair. His trust was with the eternal to be deemed equal in strength, and rather than be less, cared not to be at all. With that care lost went all his fear, of God or hell or worse. He reckoned not, and these words thereafter spoke. My sentence is for open war, of wiles more unexpert I boast not. Them let those contrive who need, or when they need not now. For while they sit contriving, shall the rest, millions that stand in arms, and longing wait the signal to ascend, sit lingering here, heaven's fugitives, and for their dwelling place, accept this dark opprobrious den of shame. The prison of his tyranny, who reigns by our delay? No, let us rather choose, armed with hell flames and fury, all at once, o'er heaven's high towers to force resistless way, turning our tortures into horrid arms against the torturer. When to meet the noise of his almighty engine, he shall hear infernal thunder, and for lightning see black fire and horror, shot with equal rage among his angels, and his throne itself mixed with Tartarian sulphur, and strange fire, his own invented torments. But perhaps the way seems difficult and steep to scale, with upright wing against a higher foe. Let such bethink them if the sleepy drench of that forgetful lake Benume. Benume? I'm not sure what that. Benume. Let's see what. No definition found. Of that forgetful lake Benume not still, that in our proper motion we ascend up to our native seat, descent and fall to us is adverse. Who but felt of late, when the fierce foe hung on our broken rear insulting, and pursued us through the deep, with what compulsion and laborious flight we sunk thus low? The ascent is easy then, the event is feared. Should we again provoke our stronger, some worse way his wrath may find to our destruction. If there be in hell fear to be worse destroyed, what can be worse than to dwell here, driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred hope to utter woe, where pain of unextinguishable fire must exercise us, without hope of end the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour calls us to penance? More destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire, which the higheth enraged will either quite consume us, and reduce to nothing this essential, happier fare, than miserable to have eternal being. Or if our substance be indeed divine, and cannot cease to be, we are at worse on this side nothing, and by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which if not victory, is yet revenge. He ended, frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge, and battle dangerous to less than gods. On the other side uprose Belial, in an act more graceful and humane. A fairer person lost not heaven. He seemed for dignity composed in high exploit, but all was false and hollow. Though his tongue dropped manna, and could make the worst appear the better reason, to perplex and dash his maturest counsels, for his thoughts were low. To vice industrious, but to nobler deeds, timorous and slothful, yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began. I should be much for open war o'er peers, as not behind in hate, if it was urged, main reason to persuade immediate war did not dissuade me most, and seemed to cast ominous conjecture on the whole success. When he who most excels in fact of arms, in what he counsels, in what he excels mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution, as the scope of all his aim after some dire revenge. First, what revenge? The towers of heaven are filled with armed watch, that render all access impregnable. Oft on the bordering deep encamp their legions, or with obscure wings scout far and wide into the realm of the night, scorning surprise. Or we could break our way by force, and at our heels all hell should rise with blackest insurrection, to confound heaven's purest light. Yet our greatest enemy, all incorruptible, would on his throne sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mould, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief, and purge off the baser fire, victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. We must exasperate the almighty victor, to spend all his rage, and that must end us, that must be our cure, to be no more. It was a sad cure, for who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being? Those thoughts that wander through eternity, to perish, rather, swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion. And who knows, let this be good, whether our angry foe can give it or will ever. How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he so wise let loose at once his ire, belike through impotence or unaware to give his enemies their wish, and end them in his anger, whom his anger saves to punish endless? Wherefore cease we then? Say they who counsel war, we are decreed, reserved, and destined to eternal woe. Whatever doing can we suffer more? What can we suffer worse? Is this then worst, thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms? What when we fled amain, pursued and struck with heaven's afflicting thunder, and besought the deep to shelter us? This hell then seemed a refuge from those wounds, or when we lay chained on the burning lake, that sure was worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires, awakened, should blow them into sevenfold rage, and plunge us in the flames? Or from above should intermitted vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? What if all her stores were opened, and this firmament of hell should spout her cataracts of fire? Imputed horrors, threatening hideous fall, one day upon our heads, while we perhaps, designing or exhorting glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest, shall be hurled, each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey of racking whirlwinds, or forever sunk under yon boiling ocean, wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprived. Ages of hopeless end, this could be worse. Woe, therefore, open or concealed alike my voice dissuades. For what force or guile with him, or who deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at one view? He from heavens higheth all these our motions vain, sees and derides, not more almighty to resist our might, than wise to frustrate all our plots and wiles. Shall we then live thus vile, the race of heaven, thus trampled, thus expelled, to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these than worse, by my advice, since fate inevitable subdues us all, and omnipotent decree the victor's will. To suffer as is to do, our strength is unequal, nor the law unjust that so ordains. This was at first resolved, if we were wise against so great a foe contending, and so doubtful what might fall. I laugh when those who with the spear are bold and venturous, if that fail them, shrink in fear what yet they must follow. to endure exile or ignominy, or bonds or pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may much remit his anger, and perhaps thus far removed, not mind us not offending, satisfied with what is punished, whence these raging fires will slacken, if his breath stir not their flame. Our purer essence then will overcome the noxious vapour, or endured not feel, or changed at length into the place conformed in temper and nature, will receive familiar the fierce heat, and void of pain this horror will grow mild, this darkness light. Besides, what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring? What chance, what change worth waiting? Since our present lot appears, for happy though but ill, for ill not worst, if we procure not to ourselves more woe. And thus Belial, with words clothed in reason's garb, counselled ignoble ease and peaceful sloth. Not peace. After him, thus Mammon spoke. Either to disenthrone the King of Heaven, we war if war be best, or to regain our own right lost, him to unthrone we then may hope, when everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance, and chaos judge the strife. The former vain to hope argues, as vain the latter. For what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord supreme we overpower? Suppose he should relent, and publish grace to all, on promise made of new subjection, with what eyes could we stand in his presence humble, and receive strict laws imposed to celebrate his throne with warbled hymns, and to his Godhead sing forced hallelujahs, while he lordly sits our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes ambrosial odors, and ambrosial flowers our servile offerings. This must be our task in heaven, this our delight. How wearisome! Eternity so spent in worship paid to whom we hate. Let us not then pursue by force impossible, by leave unobtained, unacceptable, though in heaven, our state of splendid vestige, but rather seek our own good from ourselves, and from our own lives to ourselves, though in this vast recess, free and to none accountable, preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness shall appear then most conspicuous, when great things of small, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse we can create, and in what place e'er thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain through labor and endurance. This deep world of darkness do we dread? How oft, amidst thick clouds and dark, doth heaven's all-ruling Sire choose to reside, his glory unobscured, and with the majesty of darkness round covering his throne, from whence deep thunders roar, mustering their rage, and heaven resembles hell. As he our darkness, cannot we his light imitate when we please? This desert soil wants not her hidden lustre, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art from whence to raise magnificence, and what can heaven shew more? Our torments may also in length of time become our elements, these piercing fires as soft as now severe, our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensibility of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels, and the settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils, with regard of what we are, and where, dismissing quite all thoughts of war, ye have what I advise. He had scarcely finished, when such murmur filled the assembly, as when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds, which all night long had roused the sea, now with hoarse cadence lull seafaring men o'erwatched, whose bark by chance or pinnace anchors in a craggy jay after the tempest. Such applause was heard, as Mammon ended, and his sentence pleased, advising peace. For such another field they dreaded worse than hell, so much the fear of the thunder and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire to found this nether empire, which might rise by policy and long process of time in emulation opposite heaven. which when Beelzebub perceived, whom Satan except none higher sat, with grave aspect he rose, and in his rising seemed a pillar of slate, deep on his front engraven. Deliberation sat, and public care, and princely counsel in his face yet shone. Majestic though in ruin, sage he stood with Atlantean shoulders, fit to bear the weight of the mightiest monarchies. His look drew audience and attention, still as night or summer's noontide air, while thus he spake. And that's not to jump on this dude's line, but like, spake. Why is that not a... I wonder why that's passed out of the English lexicon instead of spoke, spake. I'm sure there's some interesting reason for it. Anyway, let's...
Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, or these titles now must we renounce, and changing style be called princes of hell. For so the popular vote inclines, here to continue, and build up here a growing empire. Doubtless, while we dream and know not that the King of Heaven hath doomed this place our dungeon, not our safe retreat beyond his potent arm, to live exempt from heaven's high jurisdiction, in new league branded against his throne, but to remain in strictest bondage, though thus far removed under the inevitable curb, reserved his captive multitude. For he, be sure, in height and depth, still first and last will reign sole king, and all of his kingdom lose no part, by our revolt, but over hell extend his empire, and with his iron sceptre rule us here, as with his golden those in heaven. What sit we then, projecting peace and war? War hath determined us, and foiled with loss irreparable. Terms of peace yet none of us after thought. For what peace will be given to us enslaved, but custody severe, and stripes, and arbitrary punishment inflicted? And what peace can we return, but to our power hostility and hate, untamed reluctance, and revenge, though slow, yet ever plotting how the conqueror least may reap his conquest, and may least rejoice in doing what we most in suffering feel? Nor will occasion want, nor shall we need with dangerous expedition to invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege, or ambush from the deep. What if we find some easier enterprise? There is a place, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven ere not, another world, the happy seed of some new race called man, about this time to be created, to be created like to us, though less in power and excellence, but favored more of him who rules above. So was his will pronounced among the gods, and by an oath that shook heaven's whole circumference, confirmed. Thither let us bend all our thoughts, to learn what creatures there inhabit, of what mould or substance, how endured, and what their power, and where their weakness, how attempted best, by force or subtlety. Though heaven be shut, and heaven's high arbitrator sits secure in his own strength, this place may lie exposed, the utmost border of his kingdom, left to their defence who hold it. Here perhaps some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either with hellfire to waste his whole creation, or to possess all as our own, and drive as we were driven the puny inhabitants, or if not drive, seduce them to our party, that their God may prove their foe, and with repenting hand abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, and interrupt his joy. In our confusion our joy upraise in his disturbance, when his darling sons, hurled headlong to partake with us, shall curse their frail originals, and faded bliss faded so soon. Advise if this be worth attempting, or to sit in darkness here hatching vain empires. And thus Beelzebub pleaded his devilish counsel, first devised by Satan, and in part proposed. For whence but from the author of all ill could spring so deep a malice, to confound the race of mankind in one root, and earth with hell to mingle and involve, done all to spite the great Creator?
but their spite still serves his glory to augment. The bold design pleased highly those infernal states, and joy sparkled in their eyes. With full assent they voted, whereat his speech he thus renewed.
Well, ye have judged, and well ended long debate, synod of gods, and like to what ye are, great things resolved, which from the lowest deep will once more lift us up, in spite of fate, nearer our ancient seat, perhaps in view of those bright confines, whence with neighbouring arms and opportune excursion we may chance re-enter heaven, or else in some mild zone dwell not unvisited of heaven's flare light, secure at the brightening orient beam, purge off this gloom, the soft delicious air to heal the scar these corrosive fires shall breathe her balm. But first, whom shall we send in search of this new world? Whom shall we find sufficient? Who shall tempt with wandering feet the dark unbottomed infinite abyss, and through the palpable obscure find out his uncouth way, or spread his airy flight, upborne with indefatigable wings over the vast abrupt, ere he arrive the happy isle? What strength, what art can then suffice, or what evasion bear him safe through the strict centuries, and stations thick of angels watching round? Here he had need of all circumspection, and we now no less choice in our suffrage, for on whom we send the weight of all and our last hope relies.
This having said, he sat, and expectation held his look in suspense, awaiting who appeared to second, or oppose, or undertake the perilous attempt. But all sat mute, pondering the danger with deep thoughts, and each in other's countenance read his own dismay astonished. None among the choice and prime of those heaven-warring champions could be found so hardy as to proffer or accept alone the dreadful voyage, till at last Satan, who now transcendent glory raised above his fellows, with monarchical pride, conscious of highest worth, unmoved, thus spake. I want to get a cleanly read on that. Till at last Satan, whom now transcendent glory raised above his fellows, with monarchical pride, conscious of highest worth, unmoved, thus spake.
O progeny of heaven, imperial thrones with reason hath deep silence and demure sayed us, though undismayed, long is the way, and hard that out of hell that leads up to the light. Our prison is strong, this huge convex of fire, outrageous to devour, immures us round ninefold, and gates of burning adamant barred over us prohibit all egress. These passed, if any passed, the void profound of unessential night received him next. Wide gaping and with other lost of being, threatens him, plunged in that abortive gulf. If thence he scape into whatever world or unknown region, what remains him less than unknown dangers and his hard escape? But I should ill become this throne, O peers, and with this imperial sovereignty, adorned with splendor, armed with power, if aught proposed and judged of public moment, in the shape of difficulty or danger, could deter me from attempting. Wherefore do I assume these royalties, and not refuse to reign, refusing to accept as great a share of hazard as of honor. Do alike to him who reigns, and so much to him do of hazard more, as he above the rest of high honored sits. Go therefore, mighty powers, terror of heaven, though fallen, intend at home, while here shall be our home, what best may ease the present misery, and render hell more tolerable, if there be cure or charm to respite or deceive, or slack the pain of this ill mansion. Intermit no watch against a wakeful foe, while I abroad, through all the coasts of dark destruction, seek deliverance for us all. This enterprise none shall partake with me.
And thus saying, the monarch rose, and prevented all reply, prudent, least from his resolution raised, others among the chief might offer now, certain to be refused, what erst they feared. And so refused might an opinion stand his rivals, winning cheap the high repute, which he through hazard huge must earn. but they dreaded not more the adventure than his voice forbidding. And at once with him they rose, their rising all at once was as the sound of thunder heard remote. Toward him they bend, with awful reverence prone, and as a god extolled him, equal to the highest in heaven. Nor failed they to express how much they praised that for the general safety he despised his own. For neither do the spirits damned lose all their virtue, lest bad men should boast their specious deeds on earth, which glory excites, or close ambition varnished over with zeal. Thus they their doubtful consultations dark ended rejoicing in their matchless chief, as when from mountain tops the dusky clouds ascending, while the north wind sleeps, o'erspread heaven's cheerful face, the lowering element scowls o'er the darkened landscape snow, or shower. If chance the radiant sun with farewell sweet extend his evening beam, the fields revive, the birds their notes renew, and the bleating herds attest their joy that hill and valley rings. O shame to men, devil with devil damned, firm concord holds, men only disagree of creatures rational, though under hope of heavenly grace. And God, proclaiming peace, yet live in hatred, enmity, and strife among themselves, and levy cruel wars, wasting the earth, each other to destroy, as if, which might induce us to accord, man had not hellish foes, and now, besides, that day and night for his destruction wait. The Stygian council thus dissolved, and forth in order came the grand infernal peers, midst came their mighty paramount, and seemed alone the antagonist of heaven, nor less than hell's dread emperor, with pomp supreme, and godlike imitated state, him round a globe of fiery seraphim enclosed, with bright emblazonry, and horrent arms. Then of their session ended, they bid cry with trumpets regal sound the great result. Toward the four winds 4 speedy cherubim put to their mouths the sounding acclamy. Acclamy? That's what it looks like, and the dictionary doesn't know. So, toward the four winds 4 speedy cherubim put to their mouths the sounding acclamy. By herald's voice explained, the hollow abyss, heard far and wide, and all the host of hell, with deafening shout, returned them loud acclaim. Thence more at ease their minds, and somewhat raised by false presumptuous hope, the ranged powers disbanded, and wandering each his several way pursues, as inclination or sad choice leads him perplexed, where he may likeliest find truce to his restless thoughts, and entertain the irksome hours till his great chafe return. Part on the plain, or in the air sublime upon the wing, or in swift race contend, as at the Olympian games or Pythian fields, part curb their fiery steeds, or shun the goal with rapid wields, or fronted brigands form. As when to warn proud cities' war appears, waged in the troubled sky, and armies rush to battle in the clouds before each van, prick forth the airy nights, and couch their spears till thickest legions close, with feats of arms from either end of heaven the welkin burns. Others with vast Typhonian rage more fell rend up both rocks and hills, and ride the air in whirlwind. Hell scarce holds the wild uproar. As when Alcides from Oelia, crowned with conquest, felt the envenomed robe, and tore, though pain up by the roots, Thessalian pines, and Lycius from the top of Oeta threw into the Euboic sea. Others more mild, retreated in a silent valley, sing with notes angelical to many a harp their own heroic deeds and hapless fall by the doom of battle, and complain that fate, free virtue, should enthrall to force or chance. Their song was partial, but the harmony, what could it less when spirits immortal sing, suspended hell, and took with ravishment the thronging audience. In discourse more sweet, for eloquence the soul, song charms the sense. Others apart sat on a hill retired, in thoughts more elevate, and reason high, of providence, foreknowledge, will and fate, fixed fate, free will, foreknowledge absolute, and found no end in wandering mazes lost. Of good and evil much they argued then, of happiness and final misery, passion and apathy, and glory and shame, vain wisdom all, and false philosophy, yet with a pleasing sorcery could charm pain for a while, or anguish, and excite fallacious hope, or arm the obdured breast with stubborn patience as with triple steel. Another part in squadrons and gross bands, on bold adventure to discover wide that dismal world, if any clime perhaps might yield them easier habitation, bend the 4 ways their flying march along the banks of the 4 infernal rivers that disgorge into the burning lake their baleful streams, abhorred Styx, the flood of deadly hate, sad Acheron of sorrow black and deep, Cactus, named of lamentation loud, heard on the rueful stream, and fierce Flagellaton, whose waves of torrent fire inflame with rage. Far off from these a slow and silent stream, Lethe, the river of oblivion, rolls her watery labyrinth, whereof who drinks, forthwith his former state and being forgets both joy and grief, pleasure and pain. Beyond this flood a frozen continent lies dark and wild, beat with perpetual storms of whirlwind and dire hail, which on firm land thaws not, but gathers heap, and ruins seams of ancient pile, all else deep snow and ice. A gulf profound as that Serbonian bog betwixt Demaria and Mount Cassius old, where armies whole have sunk, the parching air burns frore, and cold performs the effect of fire. Thither by harpy-footed furies hailed, at certain revolutions all the damned are brought, and feel by turns the bitter change of fierce extremes by change more fierce, from beds of raging fire to starve in ice, their soft ethereal warmth, and there to pine immovable, and fixed, and frozen round periods of time, thence hurried back to fire. They ferry over this Lethean sound, both to and fro, their sorrow to augment, and wish and struggle as they pass, to reach the tempting stream, with one small drop to lose in sweet forgetfulness all pain and woe, all in one moment, and so near the brink. But fate withstands, and to oppose the attempt, Medusa with Gorgonian terror guards the ford, and of itself the water flies all taste of living weight, as once it fled the lip of Tantalus. Thus roving on in confused march forlorn, the adventurous bands with shuddering horror pale and eyes aghast, viewed first their lamentable lot and found no rest. Through many a dark and dreary vale they passed, and many a region dolorous, o'er many a frozen, many a fiery Alp, rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and a shade of death, a universe of death which by God curse created evil for evil only good, where all life dies, death lives, and nature breeds perverse, all monstrous, all prodigious things, abominable, unutterable, and worse than fables of yet feigned or fear conceived, gorgons and hydras and chimeras dire. Meanwhile, the adversary... hang on, just give me a minute. I got a brain. Sorry about that. I need to take a moment to double-check something. Thankfully, I paused the recording, so it's not that bad for you all. Yes. Meanwhile, the adversary of God and man, Satan, with thoughts inflamed of highest design, put on swift wings, and toward the gates of hell explores his solitary flight. Sometimes he scours the right-hand coast, sometimes the left. Now shaves with level wing the deep, then soars up to the fiery concave, touring high. As when far off at sea a fleet descried hangs in the clouds, by equinoctial winds, close sailing from Bengala, or the isles of Ternate and Tidor, whence merchants bring their spicy drugs. They are on the trading flood through the wide Ethiopian to the Cape, ply stemming nightly toward the pole. So seemed far off the flying fiend, at last appeared, hell bounds high, reaching to the horrid roof, and thrice threefold the gates. 3 folds were brass, 3 iron, 3 of adamantine rock, impenetrable, impaled with circling fire, yet unconsumed. Before the gates there sat, on either side, a formidable shape. The one seemed a woman to the waist, and fair, but ended foul in many a scaly fold, voluminous and vast, a serpent armed with mortal sting, about her middle, round a cry of hellhounds never ceasing barked, with wide cerebrian, Cerberus, cerebrian, cerebrian, like as in Cerberus, yes, with wide cerebrian mouths full loud and round and rung a hideous peal. And yet when they list would creep, if aught would disturb their noise, into her womb, and kennel there, yet still barked and howled within unseen. Far less abhorred than these vexed Scylla, Scylla? Yes, Scylla. Far less abhorred than vexed Scylla, bathing in the sea that parts Calabria from the hoarse Trinacrian shore. Nor uglier followed the night hag, when called in secret, riding through the air she comes, lured with the smell of infant blood, to dance with Lapland witches, while the labouring moon eclipses their charms. The other shape, if shape it might be called, that shape, had none distinguishable in member, joint, or limb, or substance that might be called that shadow seemed, for each seemed either, black it stood as night, fierce as 10 furies, terrible as hell, and shook a dreadful dart. What seemed his head on the likeness of a kingly crown had sat. Satan was now at hand, and from his seat, the monster moving onward, came as fast. With horrid strides hell trembled as he strode. The undaunted fiend, what this might be, admired, not feared. God and his Son except created a thing, not valued he nor shunned, and with disdainful look thus first began.
Whence and what art thou, execrable shape, that darts, though grim and terrible, advance thy miscreated front, awarth my way to yonder gates? Through them I mean to pass, that be assured. Without leave asked of thee, retire, taste thy folly, and learn by proof hell-born not to contend with spirits of heaven.
To whom the goblin, full of wrath, replied, Art thou that traitor angel? Art thou he who first broke peace in heaven and faith, till then unbroken, and in proud rebellious arms drew after him the third part of heaven's sons, conjured against the highest, for which thou and they outcast from God are here condemned to waste eternal days in woe and pain? And reckonest thou thyself with spirits of heaven hell doomed, and breathest defiance here in scorn, where I reign king, to enrage thee more, thy king and lord? Back to thy punishment, false fugitive, and to thy speed add wings, lest with a whip of scorpions pursue thy lingering, or with one stroke of this dart strange horror seize thee, in pangs unfelt before. So spake the grisly terror, and in shape, so speaking and so threatening, grew tenfold, more dreadful and more deformed. On the other side, incensed with indignation, Satan stood unterrified, and like a comet burned, that fires the length of Ophiuchus? I don't know how to say that one. That fires the length of Ophiuchus, huge in the Arctic sky, and from his horrid hair shakes pestilence and war. Each at the head levelled his deadly aim, their fatal hands no second stroke intend, and such a frown each cast at each other, as when two black clouds with heaven's artillery fraught come rattling on over the Caspian, then stand front to front, hovering a space, till winds the signal blow, to join their dark encounter in mid-air. So frowned the mighty combatants, that hell grew darker at their frown, so matched they stood. For never but once more was either like to meet so great a foe, and now great deeds had been achieved, whereof all of hell had rung, had not the snaky sorceress, that sat fast by Hellgate and kept the fatal key, risen, and with hideous outcry rushed between. O Father, what intends thy hand? Wait, Who is this speaking? Is this, I'm going to assume it's Satan, because he's like, O Father, what intends thy hand? O Father, what intends thy hand, she cries, against thy only Son? What fury, O Son, possesses thee to bend that mortal dart against thy Father's head? And know'st for whom? For him who sits above and laughs awhile, and thee, ordained his drudge, to execute whate'er his wrath, which he calls justice bids, his wrath which one day will destroy ye both. Oh, dang it, that was the Gerblin. Whatever. That last bit was the goblin. She spake, and at the words the hellish pest forbore. Then these to her Satan returned. This is actually Satan talking now.
So strange thy outcry, and thy words so strange thou interposest, that my sudden hand prevented spares to tell ye, that yet by deed what it intends. Till first I know of thee, what thing thou art thus double formed, and why in this infernal vale first met thou call'st me father, and that phantasm call'st me son. I know thee not, nor ever till now sight more detestable than him in thee.
To whom thus the portress of Hellgate replied, Hast thou forgot me then, and do I seem now in thine eyes so foul, once deemed so fair in heaven, when at the assembly and in sight of all the seraphim, with thee combined in bold conspiracy against heaven's king, all on a sudden miserable pain surprised thee, dim thine eyes and dizzy swum in darkness, while thy head flames thick and fast threw forth, till on the left side opening wide, likest to thee in shape and countenance bright, then shining heavenly fair, a goddess armed, out of my head I sprung. Amazement seized all the host of heaven. Back they recoiled afraid, at first, and they'd call me sin, and for a sign portentous held me. But familiar grown, I pleased, and with attractive graces won the most averse, thee chiefly, who full oft thyself in me thy perfect image viewing, becamest enamoured, and such joy thou tookest with me in secret, that my womb conceived a growing burden. Meanwhile war arose, and fields were fought in heaven, wherein remained, for what could else to our almighty foe, clear victory, to part our loss and rout through all the Empyrean. Down they fell, driven headlong from the pitch of heaven, down into this deep, and in the general fall I also, at which time this powerful key into my hand was given, with charge to keep these gates forever shut, which none can pass without my opening. Pensive here I sat alone, but long I sat not, till my womb, pregnant by thee, and now excessive grown, prodigious motion felt in rueful throes. At last this odious offspring, whom thou seest, thine own begotten, breaking violent way, tore through my entrails, that with fear and pain distorted, all my shape thus grew transformed. But he, my inbred enemy, forth issued, brandishing his fatal dart made to destroy. I fled and cried out death. Hell trembled at the hideous name, and sighed from all her caves, and back resounded death. I fled, but he pursued, though more, it seems, inflamed with lust than rage. Then swifter far, me overtook his mother, all dismayed, and embraces, forcible and foul, engendering with me these yelling monsters that with ceaseless cry surround me, as thou sawest, hourly conceived and hourly born, with sorrow infinite to me, for when they list into the womb that bred them, then they return and howl and gnaw at me. They are repast, then bursting forth afresh with conscious terrors vex me round, that rest or intermission none I find. Before mine eyes in opposition sits grim death, my son and foe, who sets them on, and me his parent, who would full soon devour, for want of other prey. But he knows that his end with mine involved, and he knows that I should prove a bitter morsel in his bane, whenever that shall be, so fate pronounced. But thou, O father, I forewarn thee, shun his deadly arrow, neither vainly hope to be invulnerable in these bright arms, though tempered heavenly, for that mortal dint, save he who reigns above, none can resist. And at this she finished, and the subtle fiend his lore soon learned, now milder, and thus answered smooth.
Dear daughter, since thou claim'st me for thy sire, and my fair son here show'st me the dear pledge of alliance had with thee in heaven, and joys then sweet, now sad to mention, through dire change befallen us unforeseen, unthought of, know I come no enemy, but to set free from out this dark and dismal house of pain both him and thee, and all the heavenly hosts of spirits that in our just pretences armed fell with us from on high. From them I go, this uncouth errant soul, and one for all myself expose, with lonely steps to tread the unfounded deep, and through the void immense, to search with wandering quest a place foretold, should be, and by concurring signs ere now created vast and round, a place of bliss in the parlors of heaven, and therein placed a race of upstart creatures, to supply perhaps our vacant room, though more removed, lest heaven surcharged with potent multitude might hap to move new broils. Be this our aught, then this more secret now designed, I haste to know, and this once known shall soon return, and bring ye to the place where thou and death shall dwell at ease, and up and down unseen wings silently the buxom air, embalmed with odors. There you shall be fed and filled immeasurably, all things shall be your prey.
And at this he ceased, for both seemed highly pleased, and death grinned a horrible ghastly smile, to hear his famine should be filled, and blessed his maw destined to that good hour. No less rejoiced his mother bade, and thus bespake her sire. Who's speaking here? It's a little unclear. Thus bespake her sire. So it is still Satan speaking.
The key of this infernal pit by due, and by command of heaven's all-powerful king.
Wait, no. It's her. It's the demon. It's the goblin. The key of this infernal pit by due, and by command of heaven's all-powerful king I keep, by him forbidden to unlock these adamantine gates. Against all force death stands ready to interpose his dart. Fear this to be o'ermatched by living might. But what I owe to his commands above, who hates me, and hath hither thrust me down into this gloom of Tartarus profound, to sit in hateful office here confined, inhabitant of heaven and heavenly born, here in perpetual agony and pain, with terrors and with clamours compassed round of mine own brood, that on my bowels feed. Thou art my father, thou art my author, thou my being gavest me. Whom should I obey but thee, whom follow? Thou wilt bring me soon to that new world of light and bliss, among the gods who live at ease, where I shall reign at thy right hand voluptuous, as beseems thy daughter and thy darling without end. And thus saying, from her side the fatal key, sad instrument of all our woe, she took, and towards the gate, rowling her bestial train, forthwith the huge portcullis sky-high up drew, which but herself, not all the Stygian powers, could once have moved, and then in the keyhole turns the intricate wards, and every bolt and bar of massive iron, a solid rock with ease unfastened. On a sudden open fly, with impetuous recoil and jarring sound, the infernal doors, and on their hinges great harsh thunder, that the lowest bottom shook of Erebus. She opened, but to shut excelled her power. The gates wide open stood, that with extended wing a bannered host, under spread ensigns, marching, might pass through with horse and chariots ranked in loose array. So wide they stood, and like a furnace mouth, cast forth a redounding smoke and ruddy flame. Before their eyes in sudden view appear the secrets of the hoary deep, a dark, illimitable ocean without bound, without dimension, where length, breadth, and height, and time and place are lost, where eldest night and chaos, ancestors of nature, hold eternal anarchy, amidst the noise of endless wars, and by confusion stand. For hot, cold, moist, and dry, 4 champions fierce strive here for mastery. For hot, cold, moist, and dry, 4 champions fierce strive here for mastery, and to battle bring their embryon atoms. They around the flag of each his faction, in their several clans, light-armed or heavy, sharp, smooth, swift or slow, swarm, populous, unnumbered as the sands of Barca or Cyrene's torrid soil, levied to side with the warring winds, and poise their lighter wings. To whom these most adhere, he rules a moment, chaos umpire sits, and by decision more embroils the fray, by which he reigns. Next him high arbiter chance governs all, into this wild abyss, the womb of nature, and perhaps her grave, of neither sea nor shore, nor air nor fire, but all these and their pregnant causes mixed confusedly, and which thus must ever fight, unless the Almighty Maker make them, ordain his dark materials to create more worlds. Into this wild abyss the wary fiend stood on the brink, the wary fiend, In this wild abyss the wary fiend stood on the brink of hell and looked awhile, pondering his voyage, for no narrow frith he had to cross. Nor was his ear less peeled with noises loud and ruinous, to compare great things with small, than when Bellona storms, with all her battering engines bent to raise some capital city, or less than if this frame of heaven were falling, and these elements in mutiny had from her axle torn the steadfast earth. At last his sail-broad vans he spreads for flight, and in the surging smoke uplifted spurns the ground, thence many a league as in a cloudy chair, ascending rides audacious, but that threat soon failing, meets a vast faculty. All unawares, fluttering his pennons vain, plumb down he drops, 10,000 fathom deep, and to this hour down he had been falling, had not by ill chance the strong rebuff of some tumultuous cloud, instinct with fire and nitre, hurried him as many miles aloft. That fury stayed, quenched in a boggy citrus. Citrus? No, I had it right with citrus. Quenched in a boggy citrus, neither sea nor good dry land, nigh foundered on he fares, treading the crude consistence, half on foot, half flying, behooves him now both oar and sail. As when a griffin through the wilderness, with winged course o'er hill or moory dale, pursues the Arimspian, yes, pursues the Arimspian, who by stealth had from his wakeful custody purloined the guarded gold. So eagerly the fiend o'er bog or deep, through strait, rough, dense, or rare, with head, hands, wings, or feet, pursues his way, and swims, or sinks, or wades, or creeps, or flies. At length a universal hubbub wild, of stunning sounds and voices all confused, borne through the hollow dark assaults his ear with loudest vehemence. Thither he plies, undaunted to meet there whatever power or spirit of the nethermost abyss might in that noise reside, of whom to ask which way the nearest coast of darkness lies, bordering on light, when straight behold the throne of chaos, and his dark pavilion spread wide on the wasteful deep. With him enthroned sat sable-vested Night, eldest of things, the consort of his reign, and by them stood Orcus and Aetus, the dreaded name of Demogorgon. Rumour next, and chance, and tumult and confusion, all embroiled, and discord with 1,000 various mouths. To whom Satan turned boldly thus:
Ye powers and spirits of this nethermost abyss, chaos and ancient night, I come no spy with purpose to explore or disturb the secrets of your realm, but by constraint wandering this darksome desert, as my way lies through your spacious empire up to light. Alone and without guide, half lost, I seek what readiest path leads where your gloomy bounds confine with heaven, or if some other place from your dominion one the ethereal king possesses lately. Thither to arrive I travel this profound, direct my course. Directed by no mean recompense, it brings to your behoof that if I that region lost, all usurpation thence expelled, reduced to her original darkness and your sway, which is my present journey, and once more erect the standard there of ancient night. Yours be the advantage, all mine the revenge.
And thus Satan, and him thus the anarch old, with faltering speech and visage uncomposed, answered: I know thee, stranger, who thou art, that mighty leading angel, who of late made head against heaven's king, though overthrown. I saw and heard, for such a numerous host fled not in silence through the frighted deep, with ruin upon ruin, rout upon rout. Confusion was confounded, and heaven's gates poured out by millions her victorious bands pursuing. I upon my frontiers here keep residence. If all I can will serve that little which is left, so to defend and roached on, still through our intestine broils, weakening the sceptre of old night. First hell, your dungeon, stretching far and wide beneath, and now lately heaven and earth, Another world hung o'er my realm, linked in a golden chain to that side heaven from whence your legions fell. If that be, if that way be your walk, you have not far. So much the nearer danger. Go and speed. Havoc and spoil and ruin are my gain. And at this he ceased, and Satan stayed not to reply, but glad now that his sea should find a shore, with fresh alacrity. Alacrity? Yes. With fresh alacrity and force renewed, sprung upward like a pyramid of fire into the wild expanse, and through the shock of fighting elements on all sides round, environed wins his way, harder beset and more endangered than when Argo passed through Bosporus betwixt the justling rocks, or when Ulysses on the laboured shunned Charybdis, and by the other whirlpool steered. So he with difficulty and labour hard moved on, with difficulty and labour he. But he once passed, soon after, when man fell, a strange alteration. Sin and death amain following his track, such was the will of heaven. Paved after him a broad and beaten way over the dark abyss, whose boiling gulf tamely endured a bridge of wondrous length, from hell continued reaching the utmost orb of this frail world, by which the spirits perverse, with easy intercourse, pass to and fro to tempt or punish mortals, except whom God and good angels guard by special grace. But now at last the sacred influence of light appears, and from the walls of heaven shoots far into the bosom of dim night a glimmering dawn. Here nature first begins her farthest verge, and chaos to retire, as from her outmost works a broken foe. With tumult less, and with less hostile din, that Satan with less toil, and now with ease, wafts on the calmer waves by dubious light, and like a weather-beaten vessel holds gladly the port, though shrouds and tackle torn, or in the emptier waste resembling air, weighs his spread wings, at leisure to behold, far off the imperial heaven, extended wide in circuit, undetermined square around, with opal towers and battlements adorned, of living sapphire, once his native seat. And fast by hanging in golden chain, this pendant world, in largeness as a star, of smallest magnitude, close by the moon. Thither full fraught with mischievous revenge, accursed, and in accursed hour, he hies. Alright, so if the third chapter, I should say, I'm not sure what they call books chapters, it might have been just an old convention. If the third book is anywhere near as long as the second and first books are, we are not going to be able to continue for the rest of the night, and we've only got 15 extra minutes on the recording anyway. I'm going to bookmark where I am right now, and I'm going to look at the table of contents. There are 10 books, and we are 17% of the way through there are 10 chapters, and we're 17% of the way through the thing, so I would assume the third book, as in the third chapter, is going to be that long as well. So I think we're going to call it an evening here, just a bit early, just because if I don't, then we'll be over time by a long way. But before I go, we need to promote what I do here. So this has been Paper Cuts. It is my favorite show to do around here because I get to read shining jewels of novels like that. It's not the only thing I do, but it is my favorite thing to do, other than what I do on YouTube. And what I do on YouTube is called Frozen Tundra Finds. Once every now and again, when I have enough games lined up, I start a season of Frozen Tundra Finds where I pick 15 games out of a pile that I have, and I say, all right, we're gonna have a first impression with this game this week. And when the season of Frozen Tundra Finds ends, i.e. we've played all 15 games, I pick one of the 15 games from that season and say, I want to play more of this, we're going to play more of it. And while I play more of it, you all vote to pick which you all vote to pick more, pick the other game that gets played from that season. And that's the whole spiel for Monday content. Wednesday nights here on Twitch, I do a variety game. Right now, we're getting much and much as we continue. We're getting much ever more closer to completing Oracle of Ages. After we complete Oracle of Ages, I have a couple interesting games lined up. So tune in on Wednesdays if you're the sort to enjoy gaming. If not, well, you can always drop by here on Fridays for paper cuts, or you can drop by Matt Hatter Plays on Sundays if you like Dungeons and Dragons. We've been doing a campaign over there run by the ever illustrious Kid Infinite. Someone who showed up in the chat tonight, Razmatazik, is also in that campaign, and we have a beautiful time. I play a Dragonborn sorcerer named Kyros. Anyway, that's all my things. Also, these stream VODs go up in such a way that at the end of the day, I have content every day but one day of the week, and depending on if my audiobook client gets back to me, I might actually finally have something to do on Tuesdays. We'll see. I don't know. That all depends on the author of the audiobook that I'm doing. Anyway, that's my spiel. This has been Paper Cuts, and I hope it didn't sting.